Thank you. Mr. Williams.
Well, I'd first like to just start by saying that I'm thrilled this evening to hear that John has embraced my position that I've been articulating for a number of years now on the need for us to move away from having an accountability system that only looks at a standardized test and the scores from that test, but looks at student growth objectives and how much growth a student is achieving year to year. I wholeheartedly have advocated for that for multiple years, and I intend to make it my #1 legislative priority. So again, I'm just thrilled to hear that there's that support. It's unfortunate that the legislature hasn't actually implemented that strategy over the last several years. In regards to the question, though, on definition of parental involvement and how you see it, there's a few things I'd like to share on that. I think it's important that those of us that are leading and working in the school system put finally an end to the blame game that seems to go on, where we all too often, when we see problems, will say, well, it's the parents' fault, if only they were involved. But we're not taking personal responsibility as educators to say, well, what are we doing to proactively reach out to parents, to make sure that they feel welcomed, to work with them so that they know exactly how they can support in the home what we're doing with the student in school. And so in the work that I mentioned that I do with the Parent Liaison Academy right now out of the Beat the Odds Institute, we work on redefining parental involvement so that it focuses on a few things to say we're going to empower our parents to know concretely exactly where their child is at academically at the beginning of each year. Based on that knowledge, we're going to provide them some specific strategies that we would recommend that they can do in the home to, again, support what we're doing in the school. If they don't have the skill set to be able to do that or lack the resources to be able to do that, then we're going to work with them to provide them those skills and resources, again, through partnerships that we may have with nonprofits or workshops that we put on at the school. And then most importantly, we're going to prioritize the interaction. If we ask you to come to the school, it's because we absolutely need you there. Your time isn't going to be wasted. And we're going to have that open, ongoing communication and assessment so that we're moving it forward. We saw in the Creighton School District when this was implemented that they now have 98% or better parent participation in parent-teacher conferences, and I'm looking forward to implementing this statewide for all of our children across Arizona.
Thank you. The next question was specifically for Ms. Dugan, and it says, I'd like to further discussion of test results of AIMS with other testing. Which tests are best measures of student ability? If AIMS is not the best measure, how do we move away from it? Ms. Dugan.
Well, the AIMS is a criterion reference test, and as an educator of 37 years, I believe criterion reference test is the best because the teachers have the standards. They know what's expected of them to teach in the classroom, and when teachers know what's expected of them to teach our students, they have a lot better opportunity to write lesson plans that are aligned to assessments, and therefore our students will then be far better off in reaching those outcomes. So a criterion reference test to me is far better than a standardized test. So I will continue to fight for criterion reference testing in our public schools because to me that is the fairest way to identify whether or not teachers are teaching to the standards and our students are learning and they are progressing and showing achievement from one grade to the next. Instead of comparing a student to another student in another state, you are showing the progress of that student to to himself. And to me, that is the most fair way to show whether or not a student is learning the academic standards that the State Board of Education has passed for our students in Arizona. Not only that, the criterion reference testing in Arizona, which the AIMS is written, is equitable. All kids in Arizona are given the same standards from Bisbee all the way to Winslow. To me, that's equitable for all students. Kids in Bisbee in third grade are learning the same standards as those students in Winslow. And to me, that is fair and equitable opportunity for all students in Arizona instead of what we had before. We had criterion reference testing and academic standards in Arizona. So I will continue as Superintendent of Public Instruction to fight for criterion reference testing.
Okay, thank you. Would any of the other candidates like to give a 90-second comment?
Sure, I'll take that on,
Mr.
especially
Huppenthal.
since Mr. Williams claimed credit for my position on gain measurement. I first started looking into the research on gain measurement back in 1995 and had my initial conversations with Dr. Saunders out of Tennessee and started integrating that into what we were doing here in Arizona. And it's no simple technical issue. There are a number of models now that are out there. Saunders is now with the SACE Institute. About 2 months ago, I spent an hour on the phone talking with him about the technical challenges of implementing this, particularly at the lower levels. He told me that the kindergarten data, and he has more experience with this than any other person in the United States, he said the kindergarten data is absolutely unreliable in terms of gain data. They have not been able to put together measurements that make it reliable. And that is an extraordinary challenge because of all the academic years, the greatest gains are in the kindergarten year. And there are a variety of technical challenges with implementing this. I've taken the time to take a course in econometrics because it's leaders that have a profound knowledge that are most likely to be successful. You have a problem with both norm reference and criterion reference tests. They're both incredibly inaccurate at the ends of the scales, the lower end and the upper end, where it's most critically important that we have accuracy. And as a result, the data so far, nobody has even presented this as a challenge, but we can solve those inaccuracy problems at the ends of the scales for our kids from the 85th to the 99th percentile, and for our
Thank you
kids
very much,
from
Mr.
the 1st to the
Huppenthal.
19th. But
The red has you, sir.
I realize this, but a 90-second answer shortchanges the audience in this regard because the technicalities of this are critically important for accountability in Arizona.
Okay, thank you. And I understand that. Certainly we as a state have struggled with this issue often and everywhere. Are there any other 90-second responses? Mr. Williams.
I'd actually like to respond to this because, as I hinted in my previous response, changes to AZ Learns is going to be my top legislative priority. Again, we hear a lot of folks, especially those at the state capitol, that say a lot of good things when it comes election time, but when it's time to actually implement the policies that are going to benefit our children the most, we're not seeing that leadership there. So I just want to emphasize that again. I've been advocating for multiple years now, saying that we should have an accountability system that's based on the best practices of exemplary teachers and not on political rhetoric. And what I mean by that is we should do what our exemplary teachers do. Have a portfolio that has multiple indicators at multiple points in the year so that you get a well-rounded picture of how a child is doing. You let the teachers know where the child is starting the year academically when they get them, and then we look at how much growth is produced at the end of the year. And I would wholeheartedly agree that we have issues with assessing effectively at the lower and upper end of education, which is why I've been, like many educators, disturbed by some of the decisions the legislature's made on the lower end, now getting rid of all-day kindergarten and not supporting our children in that way, which one of my opponents here has been a proactive advocate for eliminating that. And secondly, on the upper end, we put this high-stakes graduation requirement for Ames based solely on a standardized test, but you've heard, again, from a person who's been in a leadership role on this, that that's a problem, but we've done nothing to change it.